Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So I wanted to talk to you today about a topic that I mentioned on my last video a couple of days ago. It's with regard to sort of monitoring the performance of the various embassies around the world, to see the embassies that are not keeping up with the volume of work that they should be doing. This video will show you how you can determine whether your embassy has got a backlog or is building up a backlog of AVQ status cases, and that might help you at least understand, but maybe make some decisions about what you should do next. There's some of you that can make a decision to help yourselves, and some of you are in a position where you're just going to have to be patient, and hopeful. But let's see. Let's talk that through. So, if that's interesting to you, if you'd like to know how to understand how cases get assigned to the embassy, which embassies are doing better than others, how your embassy is doing, then stick along, listen to this video, and hopefully you'll learn how I've been deducing that information. Okay. Quick note before I go any further, please subscribe to my channel. Go down to the bottom of the screen, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you get this sort of information. I chuckle a little bit because I make the mistake every 2 or 3 months. I make the mistake of looking at some of the other YouTube talking heads similar to me that are talking about DV lottery, and I just get, I get so frustrated with the lousy information that's out there. People are just, talking nonsense constantly. And the problem with that is that, of course, some other YouTuber giving lousy information appears to be just as qualified to speak about it as I am, right? Well, they're not. And the reality is they're giving incorrect information, and they should be more careful in their statements they're making. So please do subscribe to my channel. Make sure you're getting accurate information. I've been doing DV lottery since 2013. My blog has been running since 2013 or 2014. My YouTube channel is quite old now, with plenty of subscribers. Surely most people have got some understanding and that I'm giving quality, accurate information. So I hope you can understand why that's important. Okay, advert over. Let's talk about some interesting information. All right, so what I want to do is show you on Zarthisius's site some information which allows you to figure out where the embassy has got to. Now, let me show you my screen here. Right, this is my blog. This particular site is my blog. I maintain a list of all of the case numbers on the VB, so it's an easy way to get the VB case numbers to just come to the site. I've got information going back there till I can't remember, 1990. Well, 95. So I've got all of the case numbers, all of the case numbers that went current on a month-to-month basis for the regions, disregarding the accept countries, but just the sort of the main things, and since the last 20 years, basically all of the information. So I maintain this just so you've got the VB numbers easy to hand. Okay, so we know how the VB announces numbers, right? So when we see the case number 9,000 for December in 2023, this is Africa, it meant that any case number of under 9,000 was current and could have had an interview in December, right? And when they moved that number to 20,000 in January, it means that any case number under 20,000, including those cases under 9,000 that were already current the previous month, could have an interview, right? That's what the visa bulletin means. That's how progress is made. And up to March, the visa bulletin is showing for Africa 45,000. right? Okay, so that means that in theory, if an embassy was totally up to date with their work, if they were scheduling all of the cases from Africa that were current and had been processed, they would have some cases right now scheduled for March of nearly 45,000, right? Going up to 45,000. If they haven't, we have to think about why and what number are they actually at. Now, to get scheduled, remember there's a couple of things you have to be that have to be true. Your case number has to be current, which is to do with the visa bulletin. You have to have your case number has to be under the case number shown in the visa bulletin. That's the first thing. Your DS-260 has to be processed, right? And in order to get scheduled, your embassy has to make available capacity sufficient for your case and other cases in the same position to be interviewed in that month. If they can't interview all of the cases in that month, then a queue of cases, a line of cases, as they would say in America, builds up at that embassy and is transferred from month to month, right? So let's say an embassy has a capacity of 50 cases, but there's 100 cases to be interviewed, then they'll schedule those 50 cases and 50 cases will roll over to the next month. Next month, let's say they make 60 cases available, 60 interviews available, but they've got an additional 70 cases. So now they've got the 50 from the previous month. They've got 70 new ones. That's 120. And so there's going to be 60 cases, which will have to roll over to the following month after that, right? You understand? It builds up a backlog. And with some embassies, we've seen that get quite extreme, where the embassy has a backlog of over 1,000 cases and is only giving capacity of 50 or 100 or 150 per month. And that means that there isn't enough time to interview all of the cases left, right? So unless the embassy increases its capacity, it represents a real risk for cases assigned to that embassy. Okay, so that basic explanation, hopefully you understood that already, but that's the basic explanation, right? Now, we can come to SEAC data from Zarthisius's page. Now, Zarthisius has done a fantastic job of taking the SEAC data, which is official data, it's the case status data, and he imports that into his website, and he shows us, how things are going, right? He also provides the file. You can download the file in a CSV file, which you can open in Excel or a similar spreadsheet, and so you can actually do this sort of analysis yourself. He also gives us numbers, and we can see, for example, that he's showing that up to now, and I think he just updated this on yesterday. Let me just check that date. Yeah, so this is updated as of the 4th of February, so that's today. So he's just updated this, and he's showing that 13,204 cases have been scheduled for interview. 4,500 have already been issued. That's 4,500 cases, representing 8,900 people. So nearly 9,000 people have already got their visas. There's some cases, just look at the headings here. Some people are on 221G, which is what we used to call administrative processing. That's so those cases are waiting. That's 2,300 people are waiting from 1,000 cases, right? There's already been 628 cases refused, final refusal. 628 people from 267 cases. And there are 14,600 cases that are marked as ready status, which is where they have an interview scheduled, and the embassy has marked their cases having been received. Whereas in transit means those cases have had an interview scheduled, but the embassy hasn't yet marked those cases as received. So over 7,000 cases are scheduled for interview, probably between February and March, mainly between February and March. There might have been some of those cases at ready status, that were from earlier months that actually didn't appear for their interview. And those people are just no-shows. And those cases sometimes can get rescheduled to a later date, but often those cases just don't move anywhere any further. The people who got scheduled decided they weren't going to attend their interview, right? So out of the nearly 27,000 people that have already been scheduled for interview, like I say, nearly 9,000 have been issued, less than 1,000 have been refused, and there's 2,300 on 221G status. AP, by the way, is an interesting sort of status. What that actually represents is cases that are going through the visa printing process right now. All of these cases in AP status will be issued their visas within a few days, probably within a week from now. So actually the total of issued visas or approved visas is well over 9,000 actual visas, right? Okay, so that's just an explanation of the first part. Now below, as we scroll down the website from Zarthisius here, he allows us to do a couple of things. Firstly, we can move the slide bar and we can see how data used to look. We can see that same data, how it looked a couple of weeks ago, which is very useful to see how that changes over time. We get a nice visual representation of the data. I won't go into that this particular video, but there's a lot to be learned from that particular visualization as well. And then down here, he then focuses the information more about individual embassies, right? So as we put in, we can put in an embassy name, and then all of this information becomes specific to that embassy. So let's look at a fairly well-performing embassy right now. I'm just going to pick Johannesburg, South Africa, because I know that is operating relatively normally, at least to the point of view of where they schedule their cases. Now, as we look at that, we can see, okay, I want to see Africa. They've got, we can see here, let me just check this. Yeah. So they've had the 2 NLs that we knew about, 46 of them, these are cases, 46 cases were scheduled in the first 3 months of the year. So as soon as Zarthisius took the extraction of data on January 1st, he already saw that Johannesburg had 46 cases, right? Then on the 20th of January, 40 more cases were sent, 43 cases actually were sent to Johannesburg, 3 from EU region and 40 from Africa region. And then on the 27th, there was 1 more case that was sent, right? So we can see that this embassy is scheduling something like 45 cases a month. That seems to be their capacity, right? Now, is that a reasonable capacity? I've got ways of looking at that from a historical point of view, but let's just take it as read that that's a reasonable capacity for what Johannesburg has to handle in terms of the the workload that they're doing. Now, the next question is, what number ranges are those cases coming from? So if we look at Africa only, we can see that they've got cases right up to 45,000. They've scheduled cases right up to the March VB number. That shows me that this embassy is not building a backlog, because what happened was, as soon as the VB that was published just at the middle of last month, as soon as that was released, releasing interviews for March, Johannesburg embassy was able to accept cases that had previously not been current and then were current right up to 45,000, right? So that's an important indicator that they have no backlog. So even though they're only scheduling 45 cases a month or so, that is adequate for what they are being asked to do. They're not leaving a queue of unscheduled cases for Johannesburg, right? I hope that makes sense to you, but let's now just contrast that with Nairobi, right? Now, Nairobi have 119 cases that they had scheduled in the first 3 months of the year, And then on the 27th of January, they took a further 60 cases, all from Africa. 60 cases is more than Johannesburg. So that's good news, right? No, it's not good news. They need to take more. And how do I know that? Well, if we look at this chart here, we can see that all of their cases are less than 9,000, in the number range less than 9,000. Now, let's have a look at that. Why didn't they take the cases from 45,000 up to 45,000, since those cases are current, right? So if we look at the visa bulletin numbers a second, we can see that what they did was they, in up to now, including the 16 new cases they took on the 27th, they've still only set interviews for cases that were current in December. These cases were actually in the visa bulletin from October, and from the middle of October, and they could have been interviewed in December. But what's happened is that Nairobi is badly behind and has a backlog building up. All right, they are not coping well on a month-to-month basis. They've only allowed 60 new cases to be scheduled in January for March interviews, and those are only for the cases up to 9,000. So how does that happen? So a little bit of an explanation of that. Basically, prior to cases becoming current, the cases are put into a status which means that they are ready to be allocated to an embassy, but they're not yet allocated, right? And so, for example, if we look at the numbers between November and December numbers, there was a jump from 5,700 to 9,000, right? So if you were case number 8,000 at that time, and your case was processed, your DS-260 was processed, then you became schedulable. You became eligible for an interview in October. You could have received your 2NL for a December interview. That's how it works, right? It's several weeks ahead is when you get your 2NL. So what they do is they keep all of these cases just prior to them going current. They keep all of these cases in a ready status, in an RV status. It's actually termed RV, right? And those cases at that moment in time are ordered in case number order, as long as they've been processed, right? The DS-260 is processed, but they're not yet current. Then they become current, and they can be moved into the AV queue, where they're allocated to the embassy. And if you ask KCC at that point what your status is, they would send you an email saying you are current for interview processing. It means that your DS-260 has been processed, your number is current, and you've been allocated to the embassy for scheduling. The embassy don't know anything about you yet, but they've put you into a queue, right? Now, there might be 300 cases in that queue, and if that queue is for Nairobi and there's 300 cases in there, they're only going to take 60 is their capacity. That's what they're setting their capacity as. They're only going to take the first 60 cases, and the other 240 cases in that queue are going to have to roll over to the following month, right? And so that process has been happening, but even this month, even the latest 2NLs that they've sent, that only gave us cases up to the 9,000 number for Nairobi, so they are badly behind in their scheduling. All right, and that's the indicator that shows us how badly behind they are. Now, we can see that at a couple of other embassies as well. Let's have a look at it. Addis, similar sort of thing. Now, Addis has got cases under 12,000. This is kind of interesting. This is African cases, and they scheduled on the 20th of January. I'm dealing with a cough at the moment, so I'm just going to go to cough sweep. On the 20th of January, they scheduled 49 cases. And prior to the 1st of January, they had scheduled 96, right? So Addis embassy then scheduled a case. Actually, let's just have a look at the data. If I just pick up here and sort this by, I just want to look at Addis cases. I'll see what exactly that number is. So the highest case number that they've scheduled is 11,342, right? So that's Africa 11,342. Now, as we know, that case became current. It's 11,342 is 2,300 cases above the 9,000 cutoff. So it's partially into the January sort of set of cases. But that's interesting because it shows us that when those cases for up to 20,000, when those cases were allocated into the AVQ, there were that many cases, right? However many cases that was. Let's just say it was that much. And that is from 0 to 20,000 because that's the January cutoff. They were only able to go up to 11,342. They were not able to get up to the full 20,000, right? And that shows us that they weren't able to even cope with the full month of cases that went current that month and had been processed, etc. So that gives us a pretty good indicator where they are. They are part of the way through the January January feasibility, whereas Nairobi are still, or up to now, have only scheduled cases up to the December feasibility. So you can see how far behind they are, embassy by embassy. We'll look at another, so you can see the same sort of trend. Accra. I'm picking on African cases, partly because this phenomenon is happening mainly in Africa. The Ankara is also another suspect embassy that's not doing enough scheduling. But Africa has got several embassies that are really sort of behind, and they need to hurry up. Okay, so although there's been 30 cases, 30 seems to be the number that Accra have decided is a reasonable amount of cases to schedule on a month-to-month basis. So 30 is what they scheduled on the 20th of January. Up to case number 20,000 or just under 20,000. So they went closer to the January number, but of course, that means that they haven't even looked at the February or the March numbers yet, right? So there is a backlog of cases building up at Accra. Now, what does that mean? It means that if your case number, let's say your case number 30,000, and you expect to be scheduled at Accra, then you have a chance of being interviewed possibly in the next batch, maybe the batch after that, right? But it can only be at the capacity of 30 cases per month. And so we have to see how they can get above 20,000 towards even the February numbers to actually allocate and schedule your interview. And other than that, you're in a queue, right? So to an extent, the AVQ depends on your number because your number is important in all of this. You can't be added to the AVQ until your case is current. Also, the cases that just before they're added to the AVQ, they're ordered by number. However, once you get added into the AVQ, that's AV status, a line of cases at AV status or a queue at the embassy. You keep that place in line. Okay, so let's say your case number, I don't know, 15,000, and your AV status, you're allocated to the Accra embassy. If a case gets DS-260 processed after you, but is a lower case number than yours, then and they are at least a month later, then their case will not go in front of yours because they're added to the AVQ later than you. So the date that you're added to the AV line or the AVQ is important as well. That's an important critical thing. So if you're a higher case number, but you had your DS260 processed early, that can help you in those circumstances. And honestly, it shouldn't help you. This shouldn't be working this way. But because of the behavior of the embassies, it's actually going to work out this way for those embassies, right? Okay, so we can see that with a number of embassies. And I would say that the ones to be sort of careful of at the moment is Nairobi, Accra, Addis Ababa, Ankara, and I was thinking of one other, I think Khartoum. Let's have a look at Khartoum. Khartoum is also, you can see here, they've only scheduled cases up to 10,000. Now, if we look at, let's say, Yaoundé and Cameroon, we can see they're much better. They're not right up to date. They're not scheduling cases up to 45,000, but they are they've scheduled cases up to nearly 29,000. So they're much better. They've got a better handle of their AVQ. It's not ideal. It's not perfect. But it is much better than the other embassies. Okay, let's think of another couple of embassies. Oh, let's have a look at Ankara. For Ankara, we can see that they've taken a lot of cases in the first 3 months of the year, 356, and they scheduled 120 in January on the 20th. But let's see how they're doing. Yeah, from an EU point of view, right? They've only scheduled cases mainly up to, I mean, most of the cases in EU that they've scheduled are below 6,000, and then they've scheduled a few cases up to 8,000. Well, if we look at the historical visa bulletin numbers, when did that get current? Excuse me, scrolling up here. Come on. Here we go. So 6,100 is the December number for EU, and then 15,000 is the January number, right? So as we're looking for Ankara, we can see that, yeah, they scheduled the December visa bulletin up to now, basically, with a very few cases, just a couple of cases, what, a total of 4 cases from the next visa bulletin. So they are significantly behind. So even though they've done 120 interviews, that is not enough to keep up with the demand that they've got at Ankara. And that's just EU. And we can see the same thing for the Asia region. And again, if we check the visa bulletin here, we can see, yeah, they were mainly, they're mainly under 3,000. So in other words, they have, again, only scheduled cases that were added to the AVQ for the December visa bulletin. So they're that far behind in Accra. So these are the embassies that are building up a backlog, right? Now, if we look at something, if we look at another case, another embassy, let's look at Germany, for example. Actually, let's look at Paris, because Germany is I'll look at Germany in a minute, but okay, so you can see Paris, which gets cases from Africa sometimes, it gets cases from everywhere, but commonly from Africa. They're scheduling right up to date. Paris isn't ever going to do lots and lots of cases, but you know, they at least are coping with the backlog. They're not building up a backlog, and their EU cases are up to 15,000, which, from an EU point of view, let's have a look at EU. Yeah, so that's February. So that's not too bad, right? They're almost up to date. So I'm not too worried about Paris. Let's look at Germany. Germany, of course, are taking overflow from other countries, as we know. But if we look at that and say, okay, what are they doing for EU? They're up to, you know, nearly 17,000 there, 16,000 or so. So again, they're coping reasonably well. I'm not saying perfect, but reasonably well with the number of cases that they need to be taking. If we look at, let's see if they got any from Africa. Yeah, for Africa, they've scheduled cases up to 38,000, 39,000. So again, they're taking cases right up to current feasibility, right? So that's a good sign. It means they're coping reasonably well, right? Okay, good. So just have a look at one more here. We'll look at London, my hometown. Yeah, again, well done to London. They're taking cases. We can see that for Africa, they've taken a case as high as nearly 43,000. So that's right up to the minute in terms of the feasibility. So that's good, a good sign. Okay, so you can do this for your own embassy. You can have a look at your own embassy, and by doing that, you can actually figure out, okay, am I at risk here being allocated to this embassy? Now let's talk about what you can do. So if you figure out that you are at an embassy that is building up an AVQ, what can you do about it? Well, so sadly for some people, there's not very much they can do about it. If you're already in AV status, there, and you've received an email from KCC saying your case is current for interview processing, at that point in time, KCC don't want to change your case, anything about it. They just want to leave it allocated to the embassy that is in charge of your case, right? Even though the embassy has not got your case yet. And so in the past, they've been very resistant to anyone asking them to change their case. There have been a few cases, a few people who've managed to do that, but not very often. And so if, on the other hand, you are not yet, your DS-260 is not processed fully, and you're at an embassy which you can see you're going to have a problem at, then frankly, you would be much better off, if you can, by moving your case to another embassy. How do you do that? Well, the best way is to tell KCC that you've moved to another country, because, and I don't mean that you should lie about this, I'm saying that you should actually move to that country. Let's say you live in Kenya. You're not, you have, when you email KCC, they send you an email saying your DS-260 is still being processed, right? That's good news for you in a way, because right now what you could do is you could say, okay, I'm going to move to Johannesburg because I've got my brother-in-law lives there. I'm going to go and move there, right? So you move to Johannesburg, you email KCC, you don't ask them to change the embassy, you tell them to unlock your DS-260 and let you update the address because you've moved to Johannesburg and you're staying with your brother-in-law, whatever. You know, you don't have to tell them the full details, but you just have to say you need to unlock your DS-260 because you've moved. If you're not in AV status, they will allow you to do that. And then after you've updated your address, you resubmit your case. It won't cause you any delay in terms of processing. And then sometime later, a week or two later, you email them and say, please now schedule my interview at Johannesburg because I'm living there now, right? And they look at your DS-260, it says you live in Johannesburg, that's where they're going to schedule you, right? You can save your chances that way. Now, it's not possible, I understand. Not everyone can just move around the world and move to other embassies, move to other countries like that. And you should have some reason or some connection with that country to be able to move there. You should be able to make sure that you can move there with a visa, make sure you've got some family or friends there that can help you or something like that, and go ahead and do that, because that might be the only way. If you're right now waiting to be moved into AV status at Nairobi Embassy, and they've got probably 3, 4, or 5 months worth of cases building up, you may be losing your chance entirely, even if you've got a low case number, because they're going to go through the AV queue in the order in which it was built, and they're not going to get to your case ever. Right? So you literally have to sort of make that, come to that understanding, realize what's going on, and maybe you can do something to save your case. Okay? I'm giving you the information so that you can think about that. I'm happy to field questions about this. Typically on my blog is better, BritSimonSays.com. But you need to think about this carefully yourself. First of all, do the investigation that I just talked about, and then think about, okay, where else in the world, if you are concerned about your embassy, where else in the world could I move to where I would be able to enter that country, where I would be able to stay for some time. I've got family there, where could I live? And see whereabouts you could be, right? London looked good. Johannesburg looked good. Paris looks good. There are a number of embassies you can move to. In Europe, you'd be better off. Maybe you can move there. I don't know. That's for you to figure out. I can't help you with travel arrangements. I can't tell you what visa information you need, but I'm just giving the information about what's going to happen to your case. Okay. Now, from the numbers I was giving you earlier, we can see that KCC is doing all that they can to process these cases, and they will issue the numbers. They're not going to keep the whole world waiting, or the whole of Africa waiting for Nairobi embassy to get off their butts and do something. They're going to continue to issue visas at the embassies that are working well, right? So sooner or later, people that don't get scheduled will miss out. And that's what you have to think about. You have to start thinking about that now. I know a number of people that around about this time last year, January, February, March, started to think about this and started to come up with a strategy and successfully moved their cases and got their interviews, and they're now, frankly, living in America and enjoying life, as opposed to having lost their chance, which many others went through last year. Okay, they will have more than enough people to issue all of the visas this year. They won't wait for individual embassies that refuse to do the work. Okay, they will issue the visas. There's more than enough applicants. They'll issue all of the visas at other embassies. KCC don't care. They only look at the numbers. They don't care about individual cases. They don't care whether, I say they don't care, they can't control is what I should say. They can't control whether an individual embassy is misbehaving or not, okay? There's no way we can stop Nairobi, for example, behaving the way they are. There's no way we can stop them. So you need to actually take that information on board and think, okay, I'm going to be in trouble here if I wait. Okay, it's only just the beginning of February. There is time to do something if you know what's going on. Okay. All right, everybody. I hope that's covered the topic well enough for you to understand what's going on. As I said, I'm happy to answer questions about this. It's a particularly heartbreaking topic, really, because there are going to be certain embassies that, unless they drastically increase their capacity very, very soon, like in the next month or two, we are going to see some sad stories and people just waiting endlessly at certain embassies, and they won't understand what's going on. So you, having listened to this video, have been armed with the information you need to think whether you can do something to save your case. So there you go. I hope you can take advantage of that. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Have a great day now. Bye-bye.